Hi, my name is Kip Wilson, and this is my AEP 880 Cultural Diversity Digital Presentation, Mormons in America. Mormon history is typically divided into three eras: the beginnings, the pioneer era, and the modern era. We will focus first on the beginnings, followed by pioneer, and then we will get into some current beliefs and cultural practices of the Mormon Church. The group was founded by Joseph Smith in upstate New York in the 1820s, who had visions that led him to a buried book about an ancient people. After translation, this book became known as the Book of Mormon and is considered sacred scripture along with the Bible. Early settlements of the Mormons were predominantly in the Midwest, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, as they looked for space to build temples and establish settlements so they could practice their religion freely. Following Smith's death, Brigham Young led Mormon pioneers to Utah, which marked the pioneer era. This mass exodus was done to escape social conflicts in the Midwest. Pioneers set up a Mormon headquarters in Salt Lake City, Utah, where it still is today. This period in Mormon history also marked broad missionary expansion. Today in the United States, there are approximately 6.1 million practicing Mormons, followed by 1.2 million in Mexico and 1.1 million in Brazil. Some of the current beliefs and characteristics are much different from some of the beliefs and practices of those of the mid 19th century. Identified as Christians, most Mormons belong to the Church of Latter-day Saints. When you speak about the Mormon religion, one of the things that comes to mind is the idea of plural marriage, and this practice was publicized in 1852 and peaked in the 1860s. However, by the early 20th century, had kind of died off. At its peak, 20 to 30% of Mormon families practiced, but this is no longer a part of contemporary Mormon practice. The group began efforts to integrate into American culture in the early 20th century. However, some of the movements in the mid 20th century, such as the Civil Rights Movement, I guess you might say the sexual revolution, women's rights movements, things like that, had a little bit of clash with some of the traditional Mormon beliefs, and so the Mormon Church also kind of maybe backed itself off a little bit from some of that American culture, the integration into American culture, that is. There's a cultural emphasis on chastity, sex before marriage, and fidelity, sex outside of marriage, prohibiting sex before marriage and outside of marriage, religious education, and missionary efforts. The Mormon Church encourages a strong sense of community. There's an emphasis on honesty, integrity, and regular worship. Mormons tend to be very politically conservative, and many practicing Mormons follow the word of wisdom, which is a code prohibiting the use of tobacco, alcohol, coffee, tea, illegal drugs, the abuse of prescription drugs, and other potentially addictive practices such as the viewing of pornography or gambling. The law of chastity is something that is very important in the Mormon religion. As we said before, this is basically the prohibiting of sex before marriage. This is viewed and widely accepted as a very serious sin in the religion. The group Mormons are also not in support of same-sex marriage. They are pro-life, anti-abortion, and tattoos and piercings are very discouraged. So it's very safe to say that it is a culturally very conservative group, very traditional, and I guess you might even say old school in some practices. You know, when you look at the idea of tattoos and piercings that are very commonplace now, piercings are pretty much limited to a single set of earrings on a female and looked down upon for all males. So there are definitely some cultural differences when looking at modern American culture and some of the traditional practices of the Mormon Church. Some notable Mormons: former Brigham Young University and San Francisco 49ers quarterback Steve Young, entertainers Donnie and Marie Osmond, and former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney and conservative political talk show host Glenn Beck. This concludes my presentation. I hope that you found it to be very informative. I know that in doing some of this research, I was familiar with some of the practices and the beliefs and so on. However, some of the things I learned, some of the detail, a little bit tough to squeeze into a small presentation, but a very interesting culture to learn about nonetheless.